I'm personally very excited, and I know Sean has very little exposure. Johnny has a mid amount of exposure. So it's going to be a really interesting podcast in the sense of we're really going to want to see kind of the overview of Flux for Sean, especially so he can kind of see how it touches everything. Because he hears me speak about like, we got WordPress coming. Like we're going to be able to run like our HealthFi website on a decentralized WordPress, which is insane. Like that's how it should be when you have a crypto-based, podcast mixed with health. You're going to have dApps. Like we can talk to you about it afterwards. We have a dApp utilizing, cryptocurrency and fitness, like how we can get people paid to work out and integrate them into Web3. He also has his block fund, which is like, how do we actually have proof of donation? Like we got like the similar idea of seeing it from like the watches that you guys made. Like how do you have NFT to verify donation? Like instead of having 50% of donations go, can we get 80%? Like, can we have 80 cents for every dollar instead of 50 cents? Like, so there's just a lot of things in the back end we're super excited to merge because it's going to be the future related towards health and crypto. Like having secure autonomy in your health and in your finance is going to be such a big thing. But my background, sorry to jump in.
No, absolutely. I was just going to agree with you.
Yeah, my background is I'm clinically a physical therapist. I got my doctorate in Mayo Clinic in Rochester. But I started my crypto journey probably 3 or 4 years ago, just because, as we know in healthcare, there's a lot of medical debt that you get into just to kind of create licensure and things of that nature, which is totally fine. But the issue I ran into working with myself or other therapists is like, how do you free yourself from the system? And a lot of the times that comes down to you're navigating insurance and you're navigating low reimbursements. I got on a little early and I found the two guys in the corners that we're trying to redefine how do we redistribute the value of wealth, whether that's through kind of other insurance models or changing it through cryptocurrency. So that's my big background. I spend most of my day working with patients medically or in the fitness realm. Sean, you want to give a little background on yourself before we get rocking and rolling and get to know Dan a little bit?
Yeah, pretty much. I have an entrepreneur background. I've been an entrepreneur for about 12 plus years in various different ventures, I guess you would say. I'm currently right now own a wholesale distribution company that distributes organic teas, CBD products, and other type health products. And we're actually about to take on some mushroom products. So been doing that and actually getting ready to shift my retail aspect into Web3. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting as much info from you as I can. And pretty much learning to be a Web3 wizard and try to onboard as many businesses as I can.
Sounds like you and I could be friends because I love the CBD products. I love the teas, and I have I guess it's, what is it? Chaga, lion's mane. It's like a replacement for coffee. That's pretty decent. It's not coffee though, but it's okay.
It's definitely a good coffee replacement. We get Chaga straight from northern Michigan. So chaga is a really, really potent mushroom out there for sure.
You're gonna have to hook me up, bro.
We gotcha.
This is your guy. This is your guy, Dan. Like,
yes,
he's gonna be the one that's gonna pick your brain from the business side, and I'm gonna pick your brain from the healthcare side.
That's what we like.
And I think he's gonna be a great one. I've been telling him, like, getting his stuff running once WordPress goes live for him, just cutting down those costs, like running his own website on there, and like even, which we can talk about once we go live in like 2 seconds. Like he's just getting censored from like CBD distributors too. So he's gonna pick your brain on how we can work through Web3 and utilize that from payment models too. So
absolutely, that's what Web3 was born for.
I'm excited.
Real Web3, the way it should be. Yes.
Well, we got questions for that. Johnny will be in the background. He'll probably pop in after. But if y'all are ready to go, I'm gonna start the intro and we'll get it going.
Let's run it.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Eric Krieger. I'm here with Sean with Restorative Nature. We are here with the HealthFi podcast. We're here to merge health, cryptocurrency, and create sovereignty for every individual that wants to get in on this train. I am so excited today. My colleagues have heard me talk about this a lot. We are very excited to introduce Dan Keller. He is a co-founder of Flux. He's been doing technology for, I believe, 25 plus years. He's been helping change the world, add Web3 and kind of merge Web2. I'm going to turn it over to you, Dan. I'd love to hear more about you. Introduce yourself, tell our audience about yourself, and tell us about Flux.
Well, absolutely. And for those that don't know, I am Dan Keller. I am the co-founder of Flux and Zelcore. Flux is a decentralized computational network, essentially the fundamental infrastructure for Web3. And Zelcore is a multi-asset platform that we use. That's the web browser of Web3 as well. So we have a bunch of other projects we work on as well, but those are probably the two primary ones that, people that we're not well known for. I come from a world of healthcare. I spent the better part of 25 years plus as a chief information officer in a very large healthcare organization. My mother is a nurse. My sister is an RN. My other sister is an RN. Both of my daughter-in-laws are nurses. So we come from a world of healthcare. So everything has kind of gravitated in my life around care for those. And of course, I also worked for nonprofit charities as well. So I basically making the world a better place, helping people address their healthcare needs and so on and so forth, and making sure they get the technology to help deliver those new things.
Man, that is awesome. Like, that is what resonates with me from a crypto end. That leads into kind of the biggest thing with Web3. Where do you see healthcare professionals and the healthcare field itself transitioning as we move into this world of Web3? Like, how do you feel like myself or someone in your family can transition as a provider or a practitioner?
So I think probably what you want to do first is really start to understand fundamentally what Web3 is. So, because there's, Web3 can be used as a buzzword. People talk about, oh, it's NFTs and it's a metaverse and it's DeFi and it's CeFi and it's fintech and it's all this other stuff. It's not. Web3 is infrastructure. And that's exactly what Flux works to deliver, is that infrastructure model. If you're trying to have, an autonomous network or a DeFi platform and you're running on AWS where you can be censored or just arbitrarily removed, that's not true Web3. Web3 is being able to not be censored, being able to have your data yourself, to be able to be the curator of your own data. And so that's a big deal. So, with the current practice of blockchain the way it is, people really look at it and they say finance is what has been disrupted at this point. But disruptive technologies go much deeper than that. And the financial sector was a problem that wasn't necessarily looking for a solution. So we wanted a solution for it because we kind of got tired of the way things used to be, right? And there was never a solid answer for that. Along comes Bitcoin, and it changes everybody's way of thinking, that you could have this as a autonomous kind of, no third parties, no gatekeepers, no toll booths that stand in the way between you and your finances. But that's a problem that's not necessarily looking for a solution. Healthcare is the exact opposite. It is a problem that's screaming for a solution, and that's exactly where Web3 really starts to accelerate with healthcare as well. Whether it's electronic medical records or patient data, AI, and the ability. We have a couple applications that run on Flux now that do AI scanning of imaging. So maybe a human eye doesn't catch something, but as it's scanning through the process in AI, it will actually find some things that people may overlook. So it's going to continue to keep building that up. The other thing is, if you've worked in the healthcare sector, and you guys are probably very well aware of this, they're very behind the times technologically, right? So, I mean, literally, I had closets with old computers running, God knows what, shoved in these hospital systems. And really what Web3 does is it removes the barrier for people to start adopting the technology at an affordable, scalable, on-demand basis, and basically gives them the ability to do things that they haven't been able to do in the past to make healthcare be better for just everyone.
Man, that's spot on. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed from that, and I'm curious to take your thoughts on, is the role of like patient data and EMR. Like, where is that going to be scaled to? Is that going to be someone that builds dApps under the Flux ecosystem? Is that going to be something that Flux can scale up from an infrastructure perspective? Where is that kind of tailoring to in the Flux ecosystem?
Well, I think the big thing so I'll give you a story of why Flux has put a lot of emphasis on research and due diligence around healthcare. And I suffer from a chronic illness. About, I'd say, the good part of 10 years ago, I got unbelievably sick and couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I went to 25 different doctors, specialists. And the one thing that I found very, very quickly is the fact that I could not traverse between these different doctors and take my portable electronic records with it. I actually had a binder that was about this thick that I carried with me to each one of these doctor's appointments, and I'd have to drop it on the table and they'd have to go through. Well, they finally figured out what was wrong with me. I actually had Lyme disease, of all things. But for the next 2 years, I had to run treatments through these different places, and being able to share that data back and forth was absolutely cumbersome. It was archaic at best. Like the only way it could be more archaic is if you put it on stone tablets and rode around with them in your car. I mean, it's that bad. So, as we started to look at Flux originally and looked at what we could use the network for, EMR was one of the very first things we looked at. Conventionally, we have to think about what EMR looks like, because we basically have provided all of our health data, very valuable health data, to third-party curators, right? So they take care of EMR, they run the front ends, they run the back ends, they're not interoperable, so they don't go from one. These guys got Cerner, these guys got, you know what I mean, whatever it is. Nobody's working together in the same sandbox. And they've done it that way because it's a fiefdom, right? They don't want to have this interchain because, people run, maybe a cancer research study, and they want the data internally themselves because that's what drives their revenue profit, right? That's what their revenue model. So what Web3 does is it starts to put the onus back into the individual themselves rather than the providers. So it looks a lot like financial independence. Bitcoin took it away from the banking system and it put it into the hands of the individual who wanted to do their finances personally, right? So if you own crypto or whatever, you're your own bank, essentially. Well, the way that Web3 is going to start working, especially for healthcare, is it gives us the opportunity to do the exact same thing with our electronic medical records. We become the curators and the caretakers of our data. So how does that work? How does one even comprehend it? Well, you could easily see your health records inside of Zelcore that you own and you have a private key to, that you could then share a public key to. And any organization could be able to access your health records. Say I went to the local hospital, right? So we actually drafted a project called Paradigm. It's about 3 years old. We have a minimum viable project working on it right now, and it's EMR directly out of Zelcore. And it's portable. So one of the things that we wanted to do immediately, and what we thought would made the most sense, is we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. Disruptive technology is disruptive, but it can be inclusive as well. So what does that mean? It means we're not looking to take the place of the Cerners of the world or, any of these other EMR solutions. What we're looking for them to do is provide aggregated API data back to us so that we can be the curator of our own data. Nowhere else would you ever accept someone holding all of your data with no access from you. That's literally what you're doing with the current EMR system. So this gives the individual the ability to have access to those records and also be able to take them with them portably and also be able to share them with their providers as they move from spot to spot. So that's one way I see, Web3 really taking a hold and changing the way we look at healthcare.
Oh, that is beautiful. I think that is the biggest issue that I run into. I see a lot of chronic or complex pain. That's one of the biggest things that I work with in clinic. And the biggest bear is that actual information, whether it's working with a pain medicine doctor or working with one of their surgeons. It's especially if it's out of the network that I'm in. So that would be beautiful if you could just have it right on your tech, have them give you your public key. And it's also that initial tie into finance sector. Is that going to be a way to then own and monetize your own data? Would I be interpreting that correctly?
Absolutely. But it's conventionally exact opposite the way that we think of it now, right? So we're not incentivized, rewarded, or for our patient data. We go to the hospital, we go to the doctor, we provide them all our data, and then they charge us and our insurance companies, to take care of us.
Yeah.
Well, switch that concept around where you're now incentivized for your data. You maybe I have Lyme disease and I want to participate in Lyme disease studies. I can now be able to provide my data, whatever I believe is the correct amount of data, right? So I'm not going to have this broad overreach of what Google's doing with, these large healthcare organizations where they're basically gobbling up everything and then they're analyzing it. So now Google not only knows where you eat, where you sleep, where you work, what you buy. Now they know your healthcare records on top of it. So that to me, it's like, that's like a no brainer. We got to get away from that entire mindset.
Wow.
So beginning to incentivize people for participatory process in these, trials and studies, and then reward them back financially, part of the financial gains back to them, they will be more inclined to continue to participate and provide data at their comfort level. So it does switch everything around how we look at it. And most people, they accept it because they get sick, they go to the hospital, they got taken care of, and they're gone. But as we become more proactive in our healthcare, and as Mr. T said earlier, right, these pieces are, holistic. It's building yourself up, naturally, Western medicine, the whole 9 yards. These pieces are absolutely essential. And being able to capitalize on your own personal data and have that your own experiences logged by you and not by extrapolated by someone else is absolutely valuable. So you think fintech's a big deal? When we start reworking healthcare, it's going to change how everybody feels and how everybody thinks about healthcare.
Wow, that's amazing. I remember when I was a kid, my mother worked in the health industry, and her doctor's office had rooms full of files, literally just
absolutely. Yep.
rooms and just aisles and aisles full. That's amazing.
Yeah, and imagine what we could do if it was an opt-in process. So now we have PHI, we have HIPAA, we have, all these things that protect the data. Why? Because it's a third party holding the data. They're responsible for that. If it's an opt-in process where Dan is now the curator and caretaker of my data, the responsibility no longer lies on the healthcare organizations and the third-party individuals to monetize that. So it reduces their surface area for exposure, right? Increases my area to be able to be my own custodian of my own personal data, right? And it also incentivizes people to be more participatory and incentivized. Now imagine if insurance companies could jump in this as well and say, hey, Dan, if you share your data and you go to the doctor like you're supposed to, and we're going to incentivize you, maybe with maybe with crypto, maybe with lower premiums, whatever it is, because now it's participatory back and forth. But if I don't want that, and I just want to keep my data private, and it's going to be mine, I can do that as well. So conceptually, we have to think outside the comfort level because it does shake everything up.
Oh no, that's beautiful. I think that's the biggest thing that I've looked at. And we can always talk off air with some of the stuff that we're looking at from some of the health-based apps of incentivization. I think that's a big one. And then the accountability aspect too. I mean, the biggest thing we see with insurance right now is where are these large bills coming from, and having that on some type of blockchain or interface can really cut down that insurance cost too. Is that something that, and maybe this, is like insurance companies are looking at to streamline their process, whether it comes from their billing infrastructure or just their ability to manage the amount of claims that they have?
Hell no, they're not looking to change it. And I'll tell you why, because they make a lot of money from their ICD. ICD coding.
ICD-10s.
ICD-10 coding, right? So if you've ever tried to interpret a healthcare bill, literally say, give me an itemized bill of what you're charging me, they look at you like you got 10 heads. Why? Because they want to cram that down your throat. And most people don't know this. I do because I've worked in healthcare long enough, is when you get a bill to pay from a provider, and let's say it's, $500, an insurance company is able to negotiate that down, push it under their threshold, and they may pay $150 or $200 for that. The regular individuals get past the entire bill, and guess what? We can do that as well. But fundamentally, you have to understand exactly what you're being invoiced for. So if you start to take away, if the demand from the clients, from the customer starts to be, I want transparent, blockchain-based, open ledger, so I can see what I'm being, billed and invoiced on. It starts to give me, I can start actually budgeting appropriately for my healthcare. I can be proactive rather than reactive. There's all these different pieces that come into play. So I would think eventually they're not going to have a choice. Healthcare providers and doctors, insurance companies, and the customers, the patients, us, we will drive a new paradigm, and that'll be exactly how they have to begin to start working together.
And that's such a beautiful, I think was kind of leading into my next question of what's going to drive the mass adoption. I think it comes from both ends, both independent providers. I think that's one of the biggest shifts I've seen recently is like most services are now switching to more cash-based services, or whether that's can be in crypto, it can be whatever you want. And it has to be coming from the consumer as well. And I think those are going to be the two parts of the triad that are going to adopt that curve much more quickly. And I think that leads perfectly into somebody like Sean. Sean's running his own business. He's disrupting a lot of kind of typical healthcare models, like we talked about, prior to the start of the call, with a lot of the teas, a lot of the mushrooms, a lot of CBDs. Like, I think that's going to be the future, where somebody like him or someone like myself can be like, hey, we can run this on the blockchain. And I think that's a perfect segue in, if we want somebody, and this can be kind of Sean leading that question, is how can we best begin that merger and that education with other health professionals or consumers to kind of bounce between that Web 2 and the Web 3 infrastructure aspect that you kind of went over beforehand?
So I think we have something, I think we're at a very unique time. And you go back 3 years to the beginning of COVID, I think the healthcare, the entire healthcare ecosystem has started to shift, right? There was very little telehealth before COVID, right? So now I do the majority of my doctor visits all via telehealth. We have less quality providers, okay? Because obviously the numbers, people didn't stay in the profession as long. Doctors retired earlier. Nurses got out of it because they couldn't deal with the BS, right? So now we have a smaller footprint just in the States, but you can count this really as globally, okay? So now what's happening is you start to see a rise of these boutique providers that are doing cash only. So my primary healthcare provider is cash only, okay? So here's the difference. When I had to go to a neurologist, I had to book an appointment. It was going to take me 6 months to get in. Okay. Why? Because the insurance just lays it on top of each other, and you might get 15 minutes if you're lucky. If you get in there, they're scheduling them about every 30 minutes. If you get 15 minutes and it's probably 2 hours late to get into the appointment, you're lucky. With the cash-based society, right? The cash-based healthcare society, I pay a premium to get in, but I get in like this. There's no insurance billing. So they basically said, we don't bill insurance. We don't do anything. We cut down on all that overhead to provide good care for you. So I spend an hour or more talking about my health, what I'm looking at, how I need to do this, how I need to do that. Maybe need to lose 5 pounds, and maybe need to switch this bed around. And your thyroid's this and X, Y, and Z. I get an hour worth of quality healthcare, preventative healthcare. I pay cash. So the last time I was in there, I guess it was a couple times ago, I said, her name's Rita, and I love her. I said, Rita, have you ever thought about taking Bitcoin or cryptocurrency? And she's like, absolutely. We would love to do it. I said, okay, well, let me help you figure it out. So, I mean, you're already seeing these providers start to shift. You have there's several, like the Caribbean islands and, these areas where they have health centers where basically people go there and they pay a fraction of what it is to get it done in the States. So I think we're already starting to see this initiative, this movement, this change coming forward. And then along comes Web3 and says, guess what? Now we're going to give you the infrastructure and the technology to be able to support this initiative. And here we are. So, I think you could really see some awesome things coming here within the next couple of years around, telemedicine, more engaged patient to physician services. You got insurance companies that are going to be getting in the mix, guaranteed. So, I think it's really going to be a positive thing across the board.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely the future. And I think that's the coolest part. And I think that would actually be an interesting question. Like, if Rita said, yes, I want to know more about it, within the Flux ecosystem, we know that and I've talked to these guys about that, you have WordPress coming out soon. We have easily to launch dApps at this point. What would be the starting points for Rita? Like, if she wanted to kind of go that route within the Flux ecosystem, would that be switching over websites to kind of like that decentralized WordPress eventually? Would that be starting a dApp? Like, where would you recommend like a web professional that is looking to kind of start making that transition we just talked about to go or to do?
Well, if somebody's out there listening to this, somebody that creates the business model to help this onboarding process, because right now what Flux does is it provides front end, back end infrastructure. It provides servers, data servers, AI access to AI, WordPress for, very cheap web development. I mean, you can run, secure peer-to-peer, like conference calls on it. I mean, there's anything you do on the regular internet, you can do on Flux. But here's the difference. We're doing it pennies on the dollar, literally. So small companies, Rita, who has her and maybe, 5 people that work for her, right, now can all have the same access to maybe Ascension Health or Pinnacle Health Systems, right? Because now they at the same kind of offset in terms of price. So she's paying pennies on the dollar. These guys are already paying premiums, right? So they can benefit from it as well. So I think you start to see this shift where businesses will start forming around that onboarding and development. Paradigm and what we came out with was very specific. My data, actually, my healthcare data already sits inside of a minimal viable product. I can access right on my cell phone. Now I chose to do that because I wanted to be the guinea pig for the data. But really, honestly, those opportunities are going to be coming fast and furious. We were waiting on a few last components for Flux to deploy. WordPress was one of them. And now it's wide open. You can do anything you do on conventional infrastructure, you're going to be able to do it on Flux.
Perfect. Yeah. Eric was the one who introduced me to Flux. And that's one thing that, I kind of moved to Shopify, was looking at, learning about Web3. And then I find out, it's going to be centralized on that aspect. So learning about this, I'm wanting to learn more about the hosting, run it, put some dApps on there, and definitely going to be trying it out soon.
Yeah, our goal is to have it super easy for Shopify or point of sale systems that are integrated in the healthcare ecosystem to be easily deployed on Flux, because WordPress was the first step, and you can start to layer plugins on top of WordPress that starts to build up this robustness, almost like a Shopify based platform. Here's a hint, a little leak. There's a company that's already working on building Shopify for Flux. It's going to be completely different, and it's going to revolve around crypto integration, right? So being able to take Bitcoin or Flux or Litecoin or whatever for your payment settlement mechanism, but also has a tie back to fiat as well. So if normal people want to use a credit card or Apple Pay or Android, you can do it. So the cool thing about Web3 is whatever was created in Web 2 doesn't naturally transition to Web3. So you can be the first to do these things, right? You don't have to have the gun slinging power of Cerner to be able to be the first, true EMR platform on Web3. It does, because it doesn't transfer, right? And the other thing is these guys are they're the Titanic, right? They're moving, and to turn for them is absolutely impossible. But somebody that's a small, agile 4 or 5 person team that can build it on Web3, they just beat them with a first mover advantage. And we're seeing it in many different platforms, but definitely we'll see it in healthcare.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm definitely looking to be the first organic tea shop on Flux. That would be a really
that'd be killer, man.
Definitely.
Here we go.
So could you explain a little bit more about the hosting, the website, and dApps, and how that kind of works for small businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about Flux. Flux is about 16,000 nodes that are deployed across the globe. They're ran by regular, everyday people like us. I call them decentralized systems administrators. We are the world's largest and only decentralized infrastructure. So, we're a proof of work product. So we're basically a fork of Bitcoin. And then we also added on top of the chain our proof of use work model. So half of our network is proof of work, half is proof of use work. That's what runs all of our infrastructure on this side. And together they work in this symbiotic relationship to provide infrastructure just to everyday people. And the goal is to provide, highly scalable, highly redundant, because with Flux, you're not deploying on one server, you're deploying on 3 servers globally. We also have the ability for geolocation in that. So say you need to have something highly available. So you want to geolocate in a particular area, game servers, EMR servers, which, you don't want to be going to Europe to fetch your, X-ray data. That's going to have to come back down again. That'd be a freaking nightmare, right? So you can geolocate as well, and that helps people remain regulatory compliant. So say you want to make sure that you continue to be HIPAA and PHI compliant within the states, and obviously geolocating would make sense, and you would be right in that in that regulatory piece as well. If you don't care about where the data is stored, you can randomly spawn it anywhere across the globe, and you call it a day, right? That's what blockchain is really about.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that Flux is really working on, is providing those resources to just small upstart businesses, normal people, and even enterprise-based infrastructure.
For a reference, Dan, just so Sean can hear our listeners, if we had a rough comparison for a website hosted on Flux comparative to like our traditional, like Amazon's, Google's, whatever else, like what is that price difference roughly?
So if everybody, especially in healthcare, we have to talk redundancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need more than one server. So let's take 3 servers. Those 3 servers deployed for a fairly decent size, let's say entry-level business model. On AWS, you're going to pay about $200. Okay. Microsoft Azure is going to be a little bit more. Let's say it's $225. And then you also have, Google Cloud, which is probably closer to $300, right? So those are the price. To deploy in 3 locations on Flux with the exact same criteria that you just named, plus no egress, so that means they're not charging you for the data that comes back out again, is going to be about $7. So, when I tell people that, they're like, it blows their mind. They're like, well, wait a minute. How can you basically give that away? It's because Flux has already incentivized the users providing the network for those compute resources. It's a byproduct of the service that we're already creating. So the node operators, the miners, the community becomes the ones that are actually facilitating the network. So we adopted very early on what's called a Linux distribution model, right? So we all know Linux. Linux is free. You can download it today, load it up on your computer, and use it. And then on top of Linux, you have the Red Hats, you have the different platforms who've built like this premium level service, right? So our goal was to keep Flux as cheap as humanly possible within reason, allow as many people to use it as humanly possible. It scales out, vertically, horizontally, and everywhere else. And we wanted to make sure that we provided the best incentive back to the end users. So how do you do that? You do that by adoption. So Flux has done this in spades. We started out with a couple hundred nodes. Then we went to 2,500 nodes. Then we went to 12,000 nodes, 16,000 nodes. And our expectation is when our next collateral happening comes, we'll have 35,000 plus nodes. We will be one of the top, within the top 5, maybe top 10 supercomputers in the entire world. And, and it's all ran by me and you and anyone else who runs the infrastructure.
Beautiful.
It's wild, Sean. Like the more I tell people about it, like you cannot believe the ability that you can have to own, whether it's your own data, run your own websites, and do it at such a cheap cost that you can actually plan for now. Because if I remember correct, Dan, you're going to be able to take fiat payments for all of that pretty much now, if I remember.
So we're the very first platform that integrated both Coinbase and Crypto.com for fiat payment models. Not even Google has that. They have Coinbase. They're working with Coinbase. So we added Crypto.com in there as well. You can also pay in any kind of crypto that is held in Zelcore. So it's called Zelcore Pay. You basically, if you want to pay in crypto, if you want to pay in Bitcoin, you want to pay in Flux, you want to pay in whatever, you can use it right directly there as well. So the goal was to limit the barrier of entry, remove the barrier of entry. So people, one, were not intimidated by crypto, right? They didn't, oh my God, it's crypto. The other thing is if I'm a medium or even a small business, a medium business, or even a large scale business, and I have to sit down and do a capital budget every year, and I have to provide data and say, I'm going to need $25,000 this year. Well, if I go to them and say, I may need 100,000 Flux, or it could be 50,000 Flux, or it could be 25,000 Flux. It's somewhere in there, right? So you can't really create capital budgets and operational budgets around the speculatory, volatile-based asset. So by pegging this into fiat and then settling it into Flux, so if Dan plays $7 in fiat, that immediately gets settled to Flux. It takes all of that barrier of entry off for those end users. I always kid my wife. My wife goes to the ATM. She sticks her card in. She puts her number in. The cash pops off. She takes her card. She leaves. She doesn't care about everything that went behind those seats, all the infrastructure globally that runs that, right, to bring that cash to her hand. She just cares that she took the money and she took her card and off she went, right? So we the geeks of the world, we like the stuff that happens behind the scene. But for us to get major level adoption, we need it to be as seamless and as clean for both enterprise as it is for the everyday user. And that is exactly what Flux is focused on.
That's amazing. And one of the issues I've had in dealing with Web 2 is Wix or none of these payment processors would allow us to take payments in CBD hemp products. They would basically debo me out of 80% of my revenue, and then throw a third party in there and say, hey, pay them $150 a month, and then they'll process it on top of these fees. So yeah, it was
all
horrible.
you got to do is bypass it. That's all you got to do. Set up your payment mechanism and your payment model using a Flux Pay or Zelcore Pay. Use a crypto-based payment mechanism, and then you call it a day.
Yep.
Honestly, that's what we built is the ability to bypass those gatekeepers and those toll booths.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I'm selling a product that is legal federally and state. And you're basically telling me you're going to have to cancel my service because I sell hemp products? Like, to me, that just blew
it's
my mind.
ridiculous. It blows my mind, man. Like, how are we ever here today even having these discussions? Like, especially in the United States of America, man. Like, this should be an afterthought, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit. Well, unless we say you can't pursue it, and unless you can't make the best judgment for your own health, right?
Yep.
Come on, man. This isn't a nanny state anymore. Let people do their thing. And so they're not going to give it up willingly. They're not going to give up the ability to be the gatekeeper in the toll booth. It's going to be disruptive. And that's exactly what it is with healthcare, man. It's like, if we waited for them to provide us our own data and participate in our own, different platforms or any kind of discovery, good luck. It'll never come. It has to be forced. You have to force the hand.
Yep. And that's why all of us are here. I think that's going to be the biggest key. Is it's going to be driven by, the four of us plus everybody else that wants to move this industry forward and merge the technologies and make it seamless. So I think that's super amazing. Like, where do you see Flux in 5 to 10 years, Dan? Like, if we look out and zoom back out, whether that can go down the healthcare route, that can go down finance, whatever you want, where do you see that fleshing out with all of the road work in place with the dApps and now the WordPress and all of those things? What's next for Flux?
So what's the number one thing you hear about crypto when somebody says, well, what can you use blockchain for? Like, what value of it is? And I mean, even the naysayers, they say it's just a magic internet, not money. It's Ponzi scheme. It's whatever it is. Okay. So we haven't had, other than Bitcoin, we haven't had real use cases for the technology part of it, right? The meat and potatoes technology part of it. And that's exactly what Flux is starting to develop, is those use cases. So when somebody says to me, what can you use Flux for? It's God bless whoever just asked, because they're going to get 20 minutes of use case that I'm going to spread on them. And they're going to be like, I had no idea. So I think we continue over the next several years working on our, basically on our build out. So, Flux could not handle all of Web 2 today. So it's going to be a scalable piece. I always tell people, if you're looking at Flux, it's a long-term investment. We're Amazon year 2. We figured out the framework. So when Bezos was selling books in his basement, okay, he took his first funding round, $1 million, and he said, I'm going to build out a delivery model, right? Books is the thing that I'm going to work on delivering, right? Because I got to figure out how to get it shipped cheap. I got to get it to people's doors. I got to make sure they're going to utilize it. And he built this framework for books. And then all of a sudden he said, well, now that I built the framework, it doesn't matter what you drop in here, socks, kites, a motorcycle, whatever. I mean, I buy everything on Amazon. You know what I mean? I don't ever go to the store. I hate stores more than I could even tell you. So, but what he did is he created this delivery model, this framework. And that's exactly what Flux has done. So whether you drop electronic medical records, supply chain management, NFT, like, local bonds, or NFTs as, actual digital assets, right? This is actually an NFT.
Yeah, you
right?
guys see that, Sean.
I can touch this. It's a real thing. It's on my wrist, and it's beautiful too, by the way. I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's an NFT based watch. Born on Cadena, runs on Flux. It fixes a massive glaring issue. Rolex has got a problem. Okay. Super clones and creating knockoff Rolexes. If you see 10 Rolexes, 9 of them are fake. Think about that. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And now the super clones are so good that you would never, ever, ever, including some jewelers, would ever be able to determine whether or not they're a fake. And I know because I've seen them. I've held them. I've tore the watches apart and looked at them myself. You would have never known it. So now what this does is it fixes an issue. If I'm holding the watch and I have the NFT, I now own this asset. It is legit. It is real. And it holds value because of it, right? Mm-hmm. Expand that to anything, whether it's Louis Vuitton pocketbooks or, wine or whiskey, some high-end whiskey, things that are predominantly counterfeited. We are going to tap into an entirely different, ecosystem. So I think what you start to see is you're going to see enterprise individuals start to come. I think you're going to see small and medium businesses, which we're already seeing in droves. So I think you'll see them develop these things out. And Flux is awesome because you're only limited to your own imagination. So if you can dream it, you can do it with Flux, right? Because all it takes is Dockerization. And if you've developed it over here in Web 2 and you want to get it to Web 3, all you have to do is Dockerize the application, launch it on Flux, and you're good to go. So
that's the stuff that I was looking for right there. I hate to interrupt you guys. You guys were on a roll. Was somebody else going to speak? I know I heard a sound.
Go for it, Johnny. I was just about to ask
it's all you, buddy.
Oh man, I've been listening because I didn't want to interrupt you guys' chemistry. It was wonderful to listen in, and I apologize that I had to jump in late, but I did have to ask our CTO of the software development agency company that I own to jump in this call because he actually runs a Flux node, and he's actually a very, very savvy individual in the regards of kind of what you're speaking on, and I really wanted him to just jump on in case, obviously. Not only he had questions, but at the same time, I personally have so many just thoughts about everything you've been going on and explaining because you broke it down in such a way where it allows us, personally, with confidence to say that I'd much rather be able to go ahead and host all our future applications on Flux. And that's the idea that I think Eric's been trying to go ahead and promote this whole time. And I know that personally, we're working on some international projects with the UN, and we're doing some things across the world to make sure that we can actually create some stability through Web3. And as you mentioned, it's about the infrastructure. And I think a lot of people forget that that's really what we're participating in building. And I'm just grateful that obviously you've taken the time to really create it to such standards, as you mentioned, 16,000 nodes. I remember seeing it and participating very early on, but I never really got around to creating the quantity of a node. And dang, I lost the itch. But I thank Sal for being able to go ahead and being able to be here to give a little perspective. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Sal.
Hey, thanks for the intro, Johnny. Hey, everybody. Nice to meet everyone. Yeah, sorry for jumping late, too. I was in another meeting. I just was able to get off. But yeah, like you were saying, I have a couple of Flux nodes, and I've been following the project for a while. Very impressed with everything you guys are doing. I really appreciate the combination of having hardware and proof of stake and proof of work combined in one, and allowing the decentralization of applications that are being launched and Web3 applications that everyone is trying to build. So the applications are just gonna keep coming, and having that flexibility to expand and grow as the companies grow, the project's also going to grow, and that's really impressive.
Well, thank you, Sal and Johnny, and thanks for the kind words, and thanks for the support of the project. And I think both of you definitely understand the value of good technology. And I think one of the things that really kind of sets Flux apart from other providers is the fact that we didn't look at this necessarily from just within the States. We looked at this globally. So we're very spoiled because we live in first world, where we have access to bank accounts, we have access to good quality infrastructure, right? There's probably not a lot of areas in the United States that doesn't have a decent bandwidth or, good, good services. The nice thing about Flux is it was basically made to deploy, drop into even third world countries at some particular point in time and be able to start really ramping up their infrastructure as well. I mean, right now we're working with the University of Applied Science in Geneva, Switzerland around proof of useful work and university models that will be able to help us as well. But the ultimate goal is to get nodes and node structure in the hands of everyone. So whether you're in Africa or whether you're in Europe or wherever it is that you're at, that you need to be able to have, highly scalable, highly on-demand technology, you'll be able to see this. And, we studied very closely adoption cycles and adoption curves. So, that bell cycle that you always see where, the adoption cycle. And one of the things that we found was, we're privy to like every now and again in our lifetime, you'll have one or two moments where it goes, the paradigm has shifted, right? So the one that I'll use is the analogy, but you could easily put this into anything, whether it's refrigeration, right? Or the automobile, right? But the one that kind of matters to me is this, and what's telling is if you look at, I'm old enough to remember landline phones. I don't know if you guys are or not, but everybody's house used to have a landline phone, and cell phones were just like, woo, for the rich people, right? That had big bag that they carried around with an antenna that was that long, and it looked crazy. And what you saw was eventually, as the affordability of these devices started to come into play, that adoption cycle started to go like this, and it started to move up. And then all of a sudden, it hit this critical mass where adoption was ready, the prices were right, people were ready for the technology, and it went like that. Now there's no more landlines. I mean, very few. I don't have one, and I would say the majority of people don't have them anymore. Mm-hmm. So that technology, that sprint that drove that adoption went like this. Now, if you look in Africa, okay, for instance, you're going to see the landline adoption like this. Mm-hmm. Very, very incremental. And then when they started standing up cell towers, it went like this. So now all of a sudden you're starting to see cell phone adoption because they use M-Peso and other pieces that are actually like, they were crypto before crypto was cool. M-Peso is like a way to live there. So now what you're going to see with technology is the fact now we've built out this wireless infrastructure. So let's start taking our new Cirrus nodes and dropping them everywhere, right? And now you're starting to cover the entire ecosystem with rich edge-based compute, AI capable, right? And tied back to Flux overall. So now these developing nation states, right? These developing nations all of a sudden have access to real technology, and you see that gone. Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of our goal is to, we not make technology only for the ones that are well off and, actually have the good infrastructure, right? We want to give it to everyone. So I just thought I'd point that out. Sal mentioned something that made me think of it.
Yeah.
No, I'm grateful you said something. I'm sorry to cut you off again, Eric. And I apologize, but I'm very grateful you said something, Dan, because actually we are building a few projects out in Nigeria, and we're working in Kenya, and we would like to go ahead and really continue to bring this type of solutions forth. We are creating decentralized marketplaces for farmers. Obviously, really at the integration level, it's working with the African Digital Chamber of Commerce. So I think bringing a solution like Flux to the table would incentivize not only in the decentralization aspect of things, but also on the affordability of it. I think what you described in the business model was phenomenal. And I don't know if you'd be willing to go ahead and maybe schedule a second call beyond this, but I definitely think that this would be a conversation that needs to be had in order to guarantee that they at least can define a process to move forth with all their applications. And at the moment, it seems like supply chain has been the big deterrent, but we've actually found a way to go around that. Not only that, I don't know if you're running a metaverse on Flux yet, but it's definitely a conversation that maybe should be had as well.
there's somebody that's working on the metaverse right now, but absolutely. And anything I can do to help, I'm down for that. Anything that's going to advance, the cause for, better technology for all, I'm all about it. So, and we have a really good business development team as well. So we have about, I'd say 10 people that work, and their sole goal is to basically push the adoption curve of Flux very quickly. So, we've worked with, and the other thing is we started partnering with Web 2 based infrastructure. So Flux has partnered with OVH, Lumen, and there's another one coming. I'm not going to say who, but it's a fairly large one.
Wow.
And because we don't believe, we're not maximalists, right? We don't believe that Web 2 goes away forever. We believe you have like Web 1, which is like your on-prem, your data servers, your data, data lakes, so on and so forth, that's controlled by the individual. And then you have, Web 2, which is your VPS cloud-based infrastructure. And then you have Web 3, which is Flux, which is decentralized, right? So the way we envision it is these three worlds working together symbiotically, Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, to give the best provided service for whatever your situation is. And I will tell you this is kind of a leak too. When you go through the Flux onboarding process, and you get to the end, you will at some point have the ability to deploy both in Flux on Web 3 and Lumen and OVH on Web 2.
Nice.
So you can have redundancy in both worlds. So maybe Lumen has a really solid, and they have a really great edge compute thing. And edge compute is super important to you. And you want the security of having somebody, a Fortune 500 company behind you in Web 2. You use part of it in Lumen, and the other part, you want a cost reduction. You want to be, bleeding edge technology, and you want to do that in Flux. OVH will be geared more towards your entry level business and your mid-tier business. So your Lumen is probably more enterprise, but all these worlds working together, and by us not being maximalists, saying you guys are going to die, like we've done for finance for so long, like the banking system sucks. Everybody's going to, nope. Web 2, you guys are valuable, and we're going to be able to work together. You can't change our philosophy. Centralized by nature, always decentralized, always for the people, by the people. But if you can make me better, because it's easy to work with the people you like, it's hard to work with the people you don't like. And I love those guys too, by the way. The Lumen guys are great. The OVH guys are great. It's been an unbelievably great experience working with them. And then what's going to happen is you'll be able to capitalize on both those worlds. And you won't have to jockey between two different things. If I want to deploy 2 servers on OVH and I want to deploy 2 servers on Flux for cost reduction, maybe just that's my comfort level. And then eventually maybe sunset something over here and move more over here. You can do it now. And that's going to be a big part of why I think we're successful in the end.
Perfect. That's something that's definitely a process that I'm looking forward to look more into and potentially get involved in, because everything that you're speaking on today is something that the world needs really bad. And I loved how you stepped up and instead of talking about it and telling other people to do it, you're doing it yourself. So much respect, love what you're doing, and can't wait to start getting involved with it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Johnny, Sal, you guys got any more questions before we wrap up? I don't want to take too much of Dan's time. I know he's got some more things going on, so I want to make sure we.
Oh, you guys are good. If you guys got a couple questions, I got a couple minutes.
Okay.
No, I'm good on my end. Just pointing out the observations I'm making that, when you mentioned Web 1 and Web 2, even in those locations, you always want to have redundancy. So having that redundancy in Web 3, it's very important. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, Sal, and let's take it a step further. So what, obviously as a CTO, you understand your biggest expenses is the infrastructure that you run and the people that run it, right?
Absolutely.
So what if all of a sudden, now we talked about Flux being able to onboard Web 2 and Web 3, but what if all of a sudden we started to include people in that as well? And allowed you to have decentralized, CTOs or decentralized systems administrators that helped you facilitate your infrastructure as part of the project. These are all things that are absolutely going to happen with Flux. We're going to give people the ability to give back to the folks that are supplying the infrastructure on their networks. And people are going to be building business cases and business models specifically around that. We already are seeing people doing node services and all kinds of stuff. Well, if you take it a step further and you now have a CTO that oversees 4 or 5 businesses that have been tapped into by deployment on Flux, all of a sudden these smaller businesses, these fractional CTOs, these fractional, systems administrators become super valuable to every project. So we don't let people in the lurch and say, now you've deployed it, good luck. Hope like hell you have somebody on staff that's going to help you with it. So I think there's tons of really cool things coming down the pipe to really help CTOs like yourself be able to tap into this technology and you use it the way that it really should be and keep your costs down.
Absolutely. That's very important. Yeah. That's looking forward to it too.
Perfect. Yeah, I have one question. Any partnerships or new products that we should be looking forward to for the year 2023 or not able to speak on that yet?
Leak it. I know that thing happens. Leak it.
Leaky Dan. I would say this. I think this year you're definitely going to see the first Go ahead, Johnny. Johnny knows maybe. Okay.
I think he just had
I think this year you're definitely going to see the first Fortune 500 companies start to tap into Flux. They're already starting to kick the tires on many different things. Our initiative this year is really around our proof of useful work model. And why is that important? Well, we saw ChatGPT basically go from obscurity to it's the new coolest thing, which, by the way, I'm not impressed by it. I think all it is Clippy. Do you remember the little Microsoft Clippy guy? It's Clippy on steroids, right? But think about it from the perspective of they ran into a very unique problem immediately when they hit their adoption cycle. And that was they were spending $3 million a day on infrastructure. Okay. So on average, they spend about $3 million a month. Okay, let's say $150,000 to $200,000, whatever it is a day. It varies up and down. But the need for real processing power, like I'm talking GPUs spinning, I'm talking CPUs grinding, I'm talking solid state hard drive, standard hard drives, all working together in tandem, is going to be unbelievably critical for the next version of AI. It's also going to be unbelievably critical for, what we call headless gaming, which basically allows you to game without having a graphics card or a console. We have a minimal viable project right now that runs. We were running it in the States. They're running the server on Flux in Europe, sitting in the States on an 8-year-old iPad playing Roblox, what's the other one? Rocket League. Playing Rocket League. No latency, no ping time, just gorgeous coming through like it should be. So our goal is to bring back some of the technology that's kind of been pushed to the back burner. So like older graphics cards, older CPUs, everything, get them back in and have mass scale. It'll address our carbon footprint issue, e-waste, which is a huge, big piece of it. And we'll also be able to tap into just general, easy access and scalable infrastructure like graphics cards that can run ChatGPT. People say, can you run ChatGPT on Flux? Many of them, many, right? So, and it's just going to get greater and greater and greater. So the computational needs get greater. They get more developed. They need to be scalable. They need to be rapid. And unless we figure out a way to do that, and Flux has done that, and that will, proof of use of work will help usher that in. I think it's going to be different. I think this time next year, if we had this exact same call, you guys are going to feel a lot different about just where we're going technologically, because I think you'll see a very quick, rapid adoption of Flux. Because honestly, there's no other way around it. This is the way of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. The demand is always going to grow.
Yep.
No, I thank you for that information. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the background, and Sal has been a big influence personally for where I look at for value and investments, and he's always pointed towards Flux from the very gate. At the moment, we were not a software development agency, so my perception on how we used the technology was a little bit different, and at the time, it was more investor based. And as you said, the adoption curve has really been on a positive note towards the technology. And I truly agree with you when you say that it's the next It's where the technology is going. You have to be able to own your own personal health data. And the fact that you are very much along those type of principles makes me really happy, because we do have a move to earn application. So essentially all this data that is being collected, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what could be done. Essentially, as you said, Dockerize it, and then maybe deploy it on Flux and seeing how this could actually change everything that we're doing. I know that my partner Amin has just jumped in, and I know that we were closing off, but I'm curious, does anybody have
Hello,
any?
guys.
Hey, Amin.
Hi there.
Don't mind us. Obviously, I told them that you were definitely someone worth listening to, Dan. I told them not to kind of be a fly on the wall, just be there and listening and maybe learn a little bit more, because I want the company to transition into this type of decentralization. That really is a primary goal of mine. And obviously Sal's a big fan of it. Eric's been pushing for it. I think the way that you explained it to Sean was wonderful, and it helped me really understand how passionate you are about what you're doing and your angle, obviously, of origin with the healthcare. And man, what a wonderful story that you have. Seriously.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I think, the bottom line is, the folks that are sitting on this call right now, you guys are the ones that are going to make this work. I mean, ultimately, it's the leaders, the technology-based leaders, whether you're, your own company or whether you're a CTO of another company, you guys are going to be the ones that are driving this forward. You're going to be the driving force behind this, because you're going to understand the value add that it brings to the table. So I'll build it. We'll build it together, the community of Flux and our developers and everyone else. We'll put it together for you guys. But ultimately, it's going to be you guys that have to be the ones that steward it along the way. You're going to have to champion it. You're going to have to develop on it. You're going to have to be, advocates of it and share exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we have to also be good. We have to be able to share the story of why Flux and really just Web3 overall, whether it's not Flux or you're talking about or another project or whatever, why Web3 is so important. And, get rid of the white noise where everybody talks about the metaverse and then NFTs and DeFi and whatever, that's those bright and shiny things are awesome, but I could give two shits about them. What I care about is making sure you have the infrastructure to run all those bright and shiny things and then everything else in the standard tech stack. So you guys, honestly, you're very early to this. You guys would be, someday we'll look back and people listen to this and they'll be like, man, these guys knew what they were doing back then, right? Because you guys are onto something. I think we're onto something. And I think if we all work together, I think we could definitely have something amazing to give to our kids and their kids.
That's what it's all about.
Too, and I just wanted to thank you for your time, Dan. Like I've been talking their ear off about Flux anytime I can. Just it was the first thing I found, and like you said, the utility is what drives in my choices, investments, or even just things that I'm passionate about. I think the more that people can learn about Flux, it's truly what the future needs, whether it's any sector. And I truly, like you said, you got to beat the drum. And even for your information, the AI app that you were talking about, we interviewed them a week and a half ago. So we do have one if you guys want to share as well. Talking about, so I'll send you that link. They are awesome guys. So we interviewed them. Yeah. So they were awesome. Like it's crazy. We did it live. We just randomly picked some images from the internet. And we were able to kind of decipher on there with certainty where it would go. So it's a really cool app.
That's
awesome.
I can't wait to see that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Please send me that. And Eric and everyone else, thanks for having me on today and working around my schedule. I know you guys really played hell getting me here, and I appreciate you guys a lot for taking the time to have me on today.
Perfect. Yeah. I say let's do a follow-up, maybe 6 months to a year. I would love to get more in depth to this process that we're about to go for the next time being. And yeah, man, let's keep it going. Let's keep building.
Johnny, I look forward to that invite so we can chat about those other ones as well. Well, wishes do come true, my friend.
This guy right here. This is where you got to run that decentralized exchange. I mean, this is
yeah. Well, we're gonna put all our business on your hands. So yeah,
let's go. We're ready for it.
What I'll do is I'll facilitate an email chain, Johnny, between. Please. I'm assuming you want you, Dan, Amin.
Yes, sir.
And I'll get that sent out, and we can figure out some times so you guys can kind of talk back end and
Awesome.
Thank you, Eric.
Awesome.
That would be amazing. Once again,
amazing.
Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. And yes, look forward to next time.
All right, guys.
Have a good evening. Have a good
I
day, guys.
appreciate it.
Wait, before we go,
Okay,
Dan,
everyone.
where can people find you? We got to know where we can come find you.
You can
Give us
you
your
can-
address.
Yeah, it's runonflux.io is the website. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at runonflux. If you want to hear the rantings of a crazy old man from time to time, it's at DAK_flux. And we have a great community as well. Stay out of Telegram. That's all I'll say.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
love Telegram.
Not that
Well,
one.
then
Not
you're
that-
on your own, buddy. You're on your own.
Well, again, I'm going to sign us off. My name's Dr. Eric Krieger. I'm with Sean, Restorative Nature. We're just ending
Awesome.
the HealthFi podcast. Again, thank you so much, Dan. We will talk later. Have a good day.